She had waited months for this day. Her bags were packed. Her son's tiny hand clutched in hers. A new beginning was just one flight away. But before she could step onto that plane, she was stopped. Not because of her ticket, not because of her luggage, but because of her son. In front of strangers, in front of her little boy's innocent eyes, a mother's love was questioned, her bond was doubted, and her world shattered. This is the story of Elena Carter, a mother who gave everything, and the truth that left everyone in shock. Elena Carter never had life handed to her. Born in a forgotten town in the Midwest, she grew up in a small house with peeling paint, a broken fence, and a childhood where every dream seemed too expensive to afford. Her mother worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table, while her father's presence was nothing more than a painful memory. He drifted in and out of her life like a shadow, never stable, never dependable. But even as a child, Elena was different. She was stubborn. Where others gave up, she fought. Where others lowered their heads, she lifted hers just a little higher. When her classmates boasted about vacations or new clothes, Elena quietly mended hand-me-downs with a needle and thread. When they spoke of their plans for college, Elena worked nights at a diner, saving every coin for survival, not for dreams. And yet, despite the hardship, there was always a part of her that refused to give up on love. Elena's life changed the moment she became a mother. Marcus, that was his name. The first time she held him in her arms, the weight of the world suddenly made sense. His tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb, and in that moment, Elena swore that no matter how cruel life became, she would fight every battle for him. Marcus had a smile that could soften even the harshest days. His curls bounced when he laughed, his skin glowed under the sun, and his eyes, those deep innocent eyes, always seemed to be searching for goodness in the world. Elena was white, Marcus was black. To her, that difference meant nothing. Love didn't come in shades. It came in sacrifices, in sleepless nights, in whispered lullabies. But the world always noticed. Strangers in grocery stores stared too long. Other parents at school whispered. Even teachers sometimes looked at her with suspicion, as if her motherhood needed constant proof. One morning, after dropping Marcus off at kindergarten, Elena overheard 2 mothers talking by the playground fence. Mother 1, she must have adopted him. Look at them. No way that Sep's her son. Mother 2, doesn't steak matter? Poor boy. Imagine the confusion he still grow up with. The words sliced through her, but she walked on. Later that day, Marcus asked the question that broke her heart. Marcus, Mommy, why do they look at us funny? Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter, forcing her voice to stay calm. Elena, they just don't understand, baby. But you are perfect, and you are mine. Forever. She kissed his forehead, hiding the sting of their cruelty behind the strength of her love. Raising Marcus alone was not easy. Elena worked endless shifts at the local diner, morning shifts that bled into afternoons, double shifts that stretched into nights. Her hair often tied back in a messy bun, her hands smelling of coffee and grease. Tips were meager, but she made them stretch. Rent for their tiny 2-bedroom apartment. Groceries carefully budgeted. Second-hand clothes for Marcus, patched late at night when he slept. On the rare evenings they had together, Marcus would sit at the kitchen table, drawing superheroes on scrap paper. Marcus, look, Mommy, this one Sep's you. Supermom. Elena laughed, tears burning her eyes as she looked at the figure he had drawn, cape flowing, arms strong, face smiling. Elena, the folks don't need a cape, baby. I've got you. Despite the struggle, Elena never let despair consume her. She had a dream. Small, maybe, but powerful. Her sister Rachel lived across the country, in California. The two hadn't seen each other in years. Rachel had only met Marcus when he was a baby, and she begged Elena to come visit. Stay with me for a while, Rachel would say over the phone. Let me help. Let Marcus see the ocean. Elena always wanted to go, but life made it impossible. Until one day, after months of scrimping and saving, she finally had enough. 2 plane tickets. One for her, one for Marcus. When she told him, his reaction was pure joy. Marcus, Mommy, we cert gonna fly in the sky like superheroes. Elena laughed, hugging him as tightly as she could. Elena, yes baby, we cert going to fly. And you cert gonna see the ocean for the very first time. For the first time in years, hope felt real. The morning of the trip, Elena woke Marcus before the sun rose. She dressed him in his favorite little hoodie, packed his toy car in the carry-on, and braided his curls with care. The taxi ride to the airport was filled with Marcus's endless questions. Marcus, do planes have bathrooms? Do clouds feel soft? Will we see birds up close? Elena chuckled at his curiosity. Elena, you shall see, baby. It's sets, going to be an adventure. At the airport, everything felt electric. The crowds, the announcements echoing overhead, the hum of excitement. Marcus clutched her hand tightly, his eyes darting around in awe. For Elena, it was more than just a trip. It was proof that her sacrifices were worth it, that she could give her son moments of magic, not just survival. But as they approached the boarding gate, that magic began to unravel. The gate agent, a woman with sharp eyes and a rigid posture, watched them approach. Her gaze lingered on Marcus, then shifted back to Elena. Gate Agent Mason, is this your child? The question was a knife. Elena, yes, he seps my son. The agent didn't look convinced. She pressed her earpiece, murmured something under her breath, and gave them a tight, skeptical smile. Minutes later, two uniformed airline staff members approached. Their expressions were professional, but their eyes betrayed suspicion. Airline Staff 1. May Stem. We need to ask you a few questions before you board. Elena. Why? What isn't wrong? Our tickets are right here. But it wasn't about tickets. It wasn't about luggage. It was about the color of Marcus Sim's skin. Humiliation in public. The staff led Elena and Marcus to the side. In full view of the waiting passengers, whispers spread quickly. Heads turned, fingers pointed. Passenger 1, maybe she kidnapped him. Passenger 2, something doesn't add up. Look at them. Elena's chest tightened. Her hands shook as she fumbled through her bag, pulling out her wallet. She thrust forward photographs, Marcus at his birthdays, school reports with her name listed as mother. But it wasn't enough. Airline staff. Masib, you need to provide legal guardianship papers. Elena. He is my son. My only son. How dare you suggest otherwise? Marcus tugged at her sleeve, his little voice trembling. Marcus, Mommy, did I do something wrong? Elena dropped to her knees, cupping his cheeks, forcing a smile through her tears. Elena. No, baby, you did nothing wrong. You are perfect. And Mommy is right here. But inside, she felt her world collapse. Because in that moment, love wasn't enough. The whispers grew louder. Passengers leaned in, their curiosity mixing with judgment. Elena could feel every stare, every silent accusation. What should have been a moment of joy, Marcus's first flight, their first escape in years, was turning into a nightmare played out in front of strangers. Marcus clung tighter to her hand. His small fingers, usually filled with energy and mischief, trembled. Mommy, why are they looking at us like that? He asked softly. Elena forced a smile. She didn't feel, stroking his hair. They just confused. Baby. That steps all. Don't be scared. But inside, fear churned. Not for herself, for him, for the damage this moment might etch into his young heart. A uniformed supervisor arrived, carrying a clipboard. His expression was stiff and formal, but his eyes betrayed suspicion. Mastam, I need to confirm the nature of your relationship with this child, he said. Can you present proof of guardianship, birth certificate, adoption papers? Elena Stepp's voice shook with disbelief. Proof? I Stepp's his mother. That Stepp's my son. His name is Marcus Carter. Check my ID. Check his school records. Anything. But don't set you dare question whether he belongs with me. The supervisor remained unmoved. These are standard security checks. Mastem. We Seb had incidents in the past. We need to be thorough. The word cut like glass. Elena wanted to scream that this wasn't about safety. It was about prejudice. About the color of her son's skin beside hers. Desperately, she dug through her purse, pulling out Marcus's school ID, her driver's license, photos from family albums she had carried to show her sister in California. She laid them out like evidence in a courtroom. Here, look at these, she cried angrily. Birthday parties. First day of school. His drawings, with "Sot, Mommy Sit" written across the page. Isn't sit that enough? But the supervisor shook his head. I septum sorry, Miss Stapham. Without legal paperwork, we cannot allow you to board at this time. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus Sepp's wide eyes filled with tears. He clutched his mother Sepp's arm, crying, Mommy, don't let them take me. Elena dropped to her knees, hugging him so tightly, it felt like her arms might break. She whispered fiercely into his ear, No one will ever take you from me. Do you hear me, Marcus? You are mine, always. But even as she said it, she felt powerless. The humiliation was unbearable. She could hear passengers whispering, Maybe she really isn't his mom. Why else would they stop her? One muttered, Something feels off. Poor kid. Another shrugged. It was betrayal, not just by the airline, but by society itself. A society that looked at skin before love, suspicion before trust. As Elena knelt on the cold airport floor, memories flooded her. The nights she worked double shifts, scrubbing dishes until her hands cracked just to pay for Marcus's school supplies. The mornings she patched holes in his clothes so he wouldn't feel different from other kids. The times he had been teased at school for having a white mother, and how she had held him afterward, whispering, Love makes a family, not color. And now, all of that devotion, all of those sacrifices were being dismissed in a single moment by strangers who knew nothing of their story. The supervisor stepped aside and made a call. Minutes later, 2 airport security officers approached. Their uniforms gleamed under the fluorescent lights, their presence heavier than words. Ma Stem. We Sep been informed of a possible custody concern, one of them said. We Sep will need to ask you a few questions separately from the child. Elena Sep's chest tightened. No, she snapped, holding Marcus closer. You will not separate us. He is scared enough. Whatever you need to ask, you ask me right here. Marcus's sobs grew louder, his little hands clutching at her sweater, as if letting go would mean losing her forever. Mommy, please don't let them take me away, he begged. Elena kissed his forehead, tears running down her face. She turned her fury on the officers. Do you see what you stared doing to him? To us? This is cruelty. This is harassment. But the officers only exchanged glances, trapped between protocol and prejudice. Elena looked around desperately, hoping for a kind face, for someone to speak up. But all she saw were blank stares, some curious, some judgmental, none compassionate. Not one person stepped forward. Not one voice said, This is wrong. The betrayal cut deeper than the official suspicion. It was society itself, people who could witness a mother's pain and do nothing. Finally, Elena could no longer hold back. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor. Marcus in her arms, her sobs echoed through the sterile terminal, raw and unrestrained. Marcus cried too, his small voice breaking under the weight of fear no child should ever bear. Why? She screamed through tears. Why are you doing this to us? He is my son. He is my life. Her words hung in the air, unanswered. For a moment, the entire terminal was silent. The kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from the discomfort of truth laid bare. Hours of sacrifice, years of love, a bond forged through every struggle. All of it was being doubted in the span of minutes. Elena Stick's hands shook as she held Marcus tighter, whispering to him like a vow, No one can break us, baby. Not them. Not anyone. But inside, despair grew. For the first time since she became a mother, Elena wondered if love was enough to protect her child in a world so quick to question it. And in that moment of heartbreak, she felt utterly alone. The night after the airport incident, Elena sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the untouched suitcases she had so carefully packed. From the next room came the sound of Malik's soft breathing. He had cried himself to sleep, his small hands gripping her shirt as though letting go might make her disappear. Elena buried her face in her palms. The humiliation replayed like a cruel film. The stares, the whispers, the cutting question that still rang in her ears. Is this your son? She had always known life as a single mother would be hard, but she never imagined a world that would look at her child, her beautiful boy, and see anything other than love. For days, despair consumed her. Food lost its taste. Nights stretched endlessly. But each time Malik's little arms wrapped around her waist, each time his voice murmured, "I love you, Mommy," something inside her stirred. The fire that had dimmed began to burn again. One morning, she stood in front of the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her skin pale, but the reflection staring back was unbroken. She whispered to herself, "They doubted me. They doubted my son. But I will not let them break us." She wiped her tears, and for the first time since that day, her lips curved into a smile, not because the pain had vanished, but because she was ready to transform it into strength. She began documenting everything that had happened at the airport. Every word, every glance, every humiliation. She contacted a lawyer, determined that no other mother should endure what she had. At the same time, she poured herself into Malik's happiness. She signed him up for art classes, took him to the park, and read him bedtime stories with renewed passion. Every laugh, every brushstroke of color, every shared moment became an act of defiance against the cruelty they had faced. One evening, Malik looked up from his painting, his hands covered in bright splashes of red and blue. "Mommy, we don't need that flight," he said softly. "We can fly ourselves, right?" Her throat tightened as tears blurred her vision. She knelt, kissed his cheek, and whispered, "Yes, baby. We fly higher than they ever thought we could." Weeks turned into months, and Elena returned to work with a fire no one had seen in her before. She spoke up in meetings, took on challenges, and carried herself with a newfound strength. Late at night, when the house was quiet, she researched organizations that supported mothers like her, women raising mixed-race children in a world that too often questioned their love. She read story after story of families doubted, of mothers humiliated. Each one fueled her resolve. She was not alone, and she would never again be silent. The turning point came one evening when the phone rang. A journalist had heard fragments of her story and wanted to meet. Elena hesitated, then agreed. In a quiet cafe, hands trembling around her coffee cup, she recounted everything. Her voice cracked, but her eyes blazed. "They looked at my son and saw doubt," she said. "But all I see is love. And I will fight for him, for us, until the world sees it too." When the journalist switched off the recorder, Elena realized something had shifted. She was no longer just a mother, humiliated at an airport. She had become a voice for countless others who had been silenced. Months passed. Elena's story spread quietly at first. A few blogs, whispers in parenting groups, short posts on social media. But then it grew into something larger. Mothers across the country began sharing her words. Fathers voiced their outrage. Families who looked different stood up and said, "This happened to us too." The airline could no longer remain silent. They issued a statement, polished and corporate, carefully worded to protect themselves. But Elena knew those words were hollow. They could not erase Malik's tears, nor the humiliation burned into her memory. She wanted justice. A year after that fateful day, she found herself standing inside a courtroom. Her lawyer was beside her. Malik sat in the front row with his small legs swinging nervously. And across the room sat the airline representatives, their faces stiff and unreadable. Elena's heart pounded, but she lifted her chin. She was not here as a victim anymore. She was here as a mother fighting for truth. On the stand, her voice trembled at first, but with every word it grew stronger. She told the court how they hadn't stopped her for missing papers or real security concerns. They had stopped her because her son was black, because they could not accept that a white woman could be his mother, and in that cruel doubt, they had crushed a child's trust in the world. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not falter. She pointed toward Malik, who sat silently clutching his toy airplane. She asked them all, "Look at him. Tell me, does he deserve to grow up believing that his family, his love, is something suspicious?" The room fell into a heavy silence. Even the judge leaned forward. His expression softened with something close to sorrow. Reporters scribbled frantically. Cameras clicked, and Elena's words rippled far beyond the walls of that courtroom. By the next morning, her face was everywhere. Headlines called her brave. Gist anchors repeated her words. Love is not a crime. Families from across the nation reached out with their own stories, their own wounds. What had happened to Elena and Malik was no longer just theirs. It had become a mirror reflecting society's flaws. The airline that once humiliated her now faced boycotts and lawsuits. Executives who had dismissed her were forced to make public apologies. Officers who had questioned her were investigated, retrained, even removed from their posts. Elena did not celebrate their downfall. She had never wanted revenge. What she wanted was change, and for the first time, she saw it happening. On a bright afternoon, more than a year after that terrible day, Elena and Malik returned to an airport. The gate agents greeted them with warmth. Their papers were checked without suspicion, without hesitation. Malik's small hand slipped into hers as they walked toward the plane. "Mommy, are they going to stop us again?" he asked, his wide eyes searching hers. She knelt down, kissed his cheek, and whispered with pride and certainty, "No, baby, not this time, not ever again." As they boarded, Elena glanced back just once. The fear still hovered at the edges of her mind, but it no longer controlled her. She had faced betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak, and she had risen above them all. This victory was not only hers, it was Malik's. It was every family's who had ever been doubted for not fitting into someone else's mold. Because love, real love, never needed permission. And in proving that truth, Elena Carter had given her son and the world a lesson that would never be forgotten.